If we take not occult matters, but rather more traditional aspects of Judaism, for example, Kashrut, or the laws concerning the suitability of food, how should one approach this? Certain restrictions apply. There are things mentioned in the Torah, for example, in the book of Leviticus, and partially in the book of Exodus as well, a repetition of the law. One needs to understand, and certain guidelines given by God and over time through Talmudic teachings, these were transformed to some extent, and the basis of Kashrut emerged. It's interesting, for example, can I eat pork or not? If I touch pork, can it be considered that something is right or wrong? Perhaps accidentally. Or if on Shabbat I did something out of great necessity. These are the kinds of situations I'm thinking about.
You see, we've analyzed all of these questions in two topics that I've taught in our community for many years. I taught only two topics, law and grace. Not grace and law, but law and grace, with the primary emphasis on the law. The second topic was Introduction to Jewish Messianic Theology. All other topics in our Bible school, which has 3 levels, were taught by other teachers. I'm just thinking about which elements of the more comprehensive answer to this question could be used now.
Perhaps this relates to Kashrut, which is fascinating.
You see, from my parents, I inherited 6 volumes of the pre-revolutionary Jewish Encyclopedia. And in one of these volumes, yes, I still have them, there was a wonderful, amazing article written by Jewish specialists in Judaism, and in particular on Kashrut. It's a long article, and it's still accessible online. You can just find the Brockhaus and Ephron Jewish Encyclopedia and look up the article, Ritual Purity. When I read and reread it, this was, in a way, my favorite commentary, and still is. It helped me understand a lot, and in some cases more than the books of the Torah, the prophets, the scriptures, Ketuvim, the entire Tanakh, and of course, primarily the New Testament. This article was extremely helpful to me. Of course, I read many other things as well. It helped me to understand that modern forms of Kashrut are just a few islands that remain for modern Jews from the vast continent of ritual purity. After the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in the year 70 of the 1st century AD, which is commonly called the Second Temple, although it wasn't the Second Temple, or at least the third after the Romans destroyed it, and after other events that followed, all the Jews, including the most righteous Tzaddikim, that is, the righteous,
Yes.
So if we understand the essence, it's a tautology, the righteous, righteous. Even the greatest rabbis, the most prominent leaders of any Orthodox Judaism across all generations, were ritually impure. After the destruction of the temple, if Gamaliel II had kept a small amount of the ashes of the red heifer, then they could have purified themselves. The ashes of the red heifer are necessary for purification from the most severe ritual impurity described in the Torah. That is, the impurity of touching a dead body.
Yes.
Remember that a red heifer is a young female cow that hasn't borne a calf and is not the same as an ordinary red cow, as it appears in the Christian translations. The most righteous of righteous leaders simply wanted to hold on until the temple could be rebuilt, at least for the highest leadership. Naturally, even starting from the 2nd century, these leaders of the Sanhedrin, of the artificial Sanhedrin, why artificial? Because it didn't have the same authority that the Sanhedrin had before the destruction of the Second Temple, before this highest court convened in the temple, in the Hall of the Hewn Stones. I won't burden you with all the details in general.
I understand what you're talking about.
Yes, these attempts to somehow purify themselves, even if only themselves among the highest leadership of post-Pharisaic Judaism, turned out to be completely hopeless. And all, as I said, the so-called righteous ones of Judaism were covered from head to toe with the most severe forms of ritual impurity. Therefore, not observing Kashrut today is really a matter of neglecting some small remnants of the Kashrut that existed, say, in the area of the Second Temple before its destruction. When you understand this, you realize that these are, well, just meager remnants. Eating non-kosher food didn't make a person nearly as impure as that which could only be purified through sacrifices.
Yes.
And the temple sacrifices and the corresponding washings in the temple, because the red heifer was not sacrificed in the temple, but on the Mount of Olives. So practically eating non-kosher food back then could be atoned for and required a person to be set apart, literally, for just one day, until the next evening. But other forms of ritual impurity made a person impure for a week or for varying lengths of time and required much more complex rituals. Even from the perspective of biblical Judaism, the meaning of observing Kashrut and the absence of the temple, the priesthood, sacrifices, the altar, and the proper washings and purifications is naturally very problematic. Even from the standpoint of the Sinai law, it's highly questionable. Therefore, Rabbinic Judaism is, in fact, a kind of New Covenant Judaism, just the one New Covenant of the rabbis.
Interesting.
Which essentially replaced the Sinai covenant.